yes, deal with a slave. For death of freedom, a final choice. Those on the stone, you don't like you cowards. Do WWF, this war is wrong to be.
What's up, guys? Our Wrestling Podcast back at you with another episode. This is Dave Vicious along with Just the Total Package, bringing you our perspective on the world of professional wrestling. No inside sources, no ties to the industry, just stories from the diehards, sharing opinions with you. Today's topic, Bret Hart of the year 1992. For audio fans, give us a listen on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts, or watch our videos on YouTube at Our Wrestling Channel. Gosh dang it, can you do us a solid on social media and give us a follow on Instagram or Twitter at O.W.P 2019.
Don't get me started.
Or on Facebook at Our Wrestling Podcast. Jess, you brought up Bret for 92. What was your motivation to talk about this year for Bret?
I'm fatigued in writing legacies at this point, so I want to start. I want to steal something from Conrad and Thompson, where you just take a year or two and you just talk about it, and you can actually kind of get some good content out of it. So I enjoyed our Brainbusters 1990, our Brainbusters in the WWF 1999 episode. So I wanted to do Bret Hart in 1992, arguably his best year as a singles wrestler, his most influential and pivotal year as a singles wrestler. Some people may argue and say 97 was, and I would not disagree with you, because of the formation of the heel Hart Foundation, him being a heel in the United States, a face outside, and then of course we have the Montreal Screwjob in 1997. So I would say maybe this is right up there. It's either this year or 1997, in my opinion, that are Bret's two most important years in his career. This being one of them, with wrestling in the state of flux.
And this is the less talked about for sure, right? Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, everybody talks about 97 in the screw job, and I think a lot of people don't talk about Bret's 1992 WWF year enough.
Well, here's what's interesting, too, in 92. We'll just jump right in. Bret Hart knew his contract with the WWF was ending in early 92. He began to negotiate with WCW at that time. He was having a connection there with Brian Pillman, and Bret wanted to have a backup plan in case the WWF didn't have a plan moving forward for him. Bret was asked to drop the IC title to the Mountie at a house show in Springfield, Massachusetts. Bret wasn't sure if this was a move by Vince in case he deflected to that rival promotion, or if it was the WWF putting the title on a heel to gain heat. And then Bret thought, well, then what do we do, right? Do you have plans for me? What's happening, right? And wasn't that also the match by storyline, just where Bret had a 103-degree temperature? And
yeah, that's what they said. Kayfabe, he had like this 102, 103-degree temperature, but he fought against the doctor's orders anyway.
This past Friday night in Springfield, Mass., World Wrestling Federation history was made. The Mountie is the new Intercontinental Champion. Bret the Hitman Hart went into this title defense against the Mountie against doctor's orders. He had a 104-degree temperature. Obviously, Bret Hart not up to par. And to add insult to injury, as Bret the Hitman Hart lay in the middle of the ring, the Mountie pummeled him with the Intercontinental title belt. Roddy Piper, watching all of this from the sidelines, made his way to the ring to intercede for his friend Bret Hart. And Piper got more of the same kind of the Mountie's brand of international law enforcement.
But yeah, it was very odd that they had Bret. So there's a lot of different things. Bruce Pritchard tells the story a little bit. Everyone's story, the core is always the same, but their details are a little different, like on the outer of the core.
Yeah.
Basically, Bret knew his contract was coming up. Bruce claimed that Bret didn't know that if he didn't re-sign, it automatically grandfathered into like another contract. I don't know about that. I'm not disputing Bruce. He was there. Bruce was there. But at the same time, like, Bret's never said that. Bret basically just said, like, his contract was coming up. He wanted more money. Vince was kind of like, I just want to stay the course with you. I don't want to, I don't want to give you what you're asking for. Not that he wouldn't have given Bret more money, but not what Bret wanted. And
yeah.
I think Vince even knew, since he won the Intercontinental title in 91, they put a lot of stock in Bret. And Bret was so talented, man, that, Bret knew what to do, to get over with the crowd. And he was doing really, really well. And then at the beginning of 92, he was just sort of like, what else you got for me? I kind of want to make more money. I want to go higher. And he's like, no. And I think maybe they were tossing around having him lose to the Mountie just to get some heat, throw it on the Mountie for a few months and, get that honky-tonk man kind of heat. And then maybe Bret wins it back or maybe not. Bret was just afraid that, well, if they take it off me and they put it on the Mountie and then they find another baby face to put it on, where am I going to go? Am I going to be the world champion? You got to figure at the beginning of 92, you had Hogan, Undertaker, Sid, Macho Man, Rowdy Piper. All of them were still ended. We're going to talk about the end of 92. It's a completely different promotion 10 months later.
Down,
completely fucking different. But here in January, he was like, well, where am I going to go if you take the belt off me? So he was negotiating with WCW. Maybe it was just a tactic to put pressure on Vince. Vince, well, fine then. Drop the title at a house show, pal. And maybe that was kind of what they were trying to do with each other. It seemed like a chess game to me.
Yeah. Due to that uncertainty in both sides of the chess game that you talk about, Bret missed the Royal Rumble at 1992 pay-per-view that saw Roddy Piper defeat the Mountie to win the IC title. Jess, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the first individual title that Roddy Piper won?
Come on, Matt. Yes, it was the only singles championship that Roddy Piper won in the WWF ever.
Yeah. So, once Bret and the WWF agreed to a new contract, Bret would come back to action. And in April, at WrestleMania 8, Bret Hart would defeat Roddy Piper to regain the Intercontinental Championship match. I'm sorry, in a classic match. I still think about this match to this day.
I love this match.
I
think
Rowdy
that it's
is
not
debating hitting him with the bell, and
I know that Rowdy Piper had bigger matches box office with Hogan in like the mid '80s and stuff,
Sure.
and I know that. And he had hot matches with Greg Valentine and Crockett Promotions and the dog collar matches and stuff, and he feuded with Flair for the U.S. title. I get all that, but I want to say that if you're just like watching like Piper's, his work, his career of work, I would say this is probably one of my favorite Piper matches ever. I mean, like, man, this was really good match. The psychology was good. Neither guy, especially Piper, being a little bit of an advanced age here, and with hip injuries, didn't do anything that was out of his realm. It was really good. The psychology was really fun. Bret bled, and the ending was very creative, man. I really enjoyed the ending on here. So creative that they used the same ending for Bret and Austin at Survivor Series of '96.
It's a sleeper. What a wimp. What a wimp. Oh, look at that move off the turnbuckle. It's over. I told you Bret Hart was going to win. History has been made here in the Hoosier Dome. What a move by Bret the Hitman Hart. We got a new Intercontinental Champion.
The winner of this bout and new Intercontinental Champion, Hitman.
So
There it is.
this is the dude. Go back and watch WrestleMania 8. Piper against Bret. You won't be disappointed.
You will not. Through the summer, Bret would defend his IC title against a few different challengers, most notably against the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. They would also introduce a little-known match called a ladder match. Bret suggested the match since he had seen it in Canada at a house show to show Vince how that concept would work.
And then they stole it.
Yeah, can anybody talk about ladder matches? I mean, come on, man. It's
a lot. Well, a lot of people don't know that.
Revolutionized
A lot of
industry.
people go back and say that Michaels and Ramon were like the originators, but Bret brought the concept to Vince and Pat and just said, "I'm telling you, this will work." And so he and Shawn did a couple ladder matches in the summer of '92 to show them and demonstrate how.
All house shows, yeah.
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 The ladder tipped over. Shawn Michaels was clotheslined right on the top rope. And now the Hitman's up there. Now he's up high enough. Now he can get it. Yes!
And it's interesting because
I want to say on one of the WWE Coliseum home video releases, it might be Most Unusual Matches. I'm trying to remember the name, but there is a Coliseum home video out there that has the Bret and Shawn ladder match.
I would love to see that. I don't believe I've ever seen Bret Shawn ladder match. I would love to see that. That'd be fantastic. The original plan was for SummerSlam 1992 to be held in Washington, D.C., and Bret would defend his title against Shawn Michaels there. However, the WWF would learn they could make the show an international affair and have it at Wembley Stadium. When Bret heard that, he knew the match had to be against Davey Boy Smith, and you can edit it out. So I kind of stepped out on a limb to go to Vince prematurely.
This is Bret, by the way. This is Bret. This is being quoted from Bret.
Bret talking to Vince. Vince, rumor has it that you are going to England and you're going to have a show at Wembley. I don't know if that is true or not, but if it is true, and maybe you were thinking about having me work with Shawn and having me drop the belt to Shawn, I think that's a lousy idea. I think you should let me drop the belt to the British Bulldog in England and have the British Bulldog drop the belt to Shawn in a shorter run for Davey. And here's the thing, like, who knows if that happened, but if it did happen, Bret understands the audience you're going to be in, how it's going to work. And by the way, it became the main event, didn't it? I mean,
it did.
When we talk about it.
It was it was the only time.
Yeah,
I think still to this day where the IC titles ever main evented a pay-per-view. I don't remember any other time, any pay-per-view like that the IC title main evented.
And that's where the venue and the nostalgia of British Bulldog makes that happen. And Bret's right. Bret's right 90% of the time. So we've talked about that. We talked about how much we kind of were disappointed in Bret when we were younger, and then when you start to get older, you hear the backstage stuff, you hear all of the stuff. You're like,
I will be the first. I've said it many times, man. I did not appreciate Bret when we had. Well, first of all, it was a love-hate relationship. I love Bret, and I love the Hart Foundation is my all-time favorite tag team ever.
Sure.
Because of Bret. No disrespect against the Anvil. I like both of them together. I love the Hart Foundation. Their first incarnation with Jimmy Hart, then when they were faces, I love them. And I love the reformation of the faction in '97, of course. And I loved it all because Bret, when Bret first won the IC title for Mr. Perfect, I loved Bret. I turned on Bret when he became world champion, ironically, which in his career was his crowning achievement. But it was just the way the company was and the way he was presented as champion. It turned me off as a fan because we just came off the 80s,
It's not him, it's the machine. Yeah.
It's the machine, and I didn't know that back in the time because in 1992, 1993, Jess, I had no idea how the business worked and what the politics were and what everything was going on.
We were teenagers, bro.
Yeah, we were fucking early teenagers, so I didn't know. Now I look back, I'm like, Bret gave us some fucking gems, man. He fucking wrestled his heart out, pun intended.
Yeah, without a doubt. There's another quote for Bret. I didn't want to interrupt Shawn's chances of getting the belt. Wrestlers wait all their lives to get that moment. For me, to substitute Davey in Shawn's place was not a fair thing to do. So I did go to Shawn and tell him that. I said, Shawn, I want you to know I went to Vince. I don't know if they actually have plans for me to wrestle you at Wembley, but if they do, I'm suggesting this instead. Basically, Shawn trusted me enough to know that I was looking after him and the business at the same time.
And by the way, they were friendly at the time. I know the lure is that Shawn and Bret never got along, but back here in '92, they were friends with each other. They liked each other.
Yeah. So,
and Shawn was just starting out. I mean, Bret kind of was new on his singles run, but Bret was, just from his family upbringing and the time with the Hart Foundation, Bret was always regarded in the locker room. Even like late 80s, people were like, Bret's a fucking good wrestler. He's a good worker. And everybody knew that.
He was the best worker.
Yeah, so even though Bret really only started his singles run in the summer of '91, and Shawn started his singles run in January or February of '92, because that's when he turned on Marty, Bret seemed a lot more. Bret was a lot more seasoned than Michael was, like as a singles wrestler.
Bret was more seasoned than anyone with his work with his dad's federation years.
I mean, Shawn was a goddamn baby here and just starting his singles run. Shawn was trying to figure out, what everything was like. How does this work? How does this do that? So they were friends. They were friends with each other. Yeah.
At that moment in throughout history, I mean, Bret's got about 5 to 7 years of experience on Shawn at that moment, and it's not a disparagement to Shawn. Shawn's just really
more than that. But in WWF, he had that. I mean, Bret was in the WWF. I think he signed in '85. Is when him and the Anvil came in, and then they merged as the Hart Foundation. So Bret had been there longer than Shawn.
And Bret's career was just a decade above Shawn's. Yeah. I mean, just because it's not a detriment to Shawn. Shawn came in very young, but they're come on, man. This is Father Time we're talking about. It's a totally different world for each of them. And I think that to talk about that if we're gonna go to Wembley, we should probably have the British Bulldog involved. Just a thought. In hindsight, you're like, duh. But if Bret doesn't bring that up, what do we see? It's just wild to me thinking about that. So at August at SummerSlam 1992, in front of 80,000 fans in Wembley Stadium, Bret Hart would lose the Intercontinental title to Davey Boy Smith in an instant classic that is still talked about to this day. What made it more special?
We just celebrated it at Clash of the Castle. They had Bret and his family in the crowd, and Bret got a big ovation, and they talked about the last major event they ever had in the UK was fucking Wembley Stadium SummerSlam. You know, and they just finally returned there this year. I hope we see a goddamn WrestleMania in England, man. I really do.
I think they're owed it. It's true. You know,
I think it's coming soon too.
On the part of both participants. Sunset flip.
Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of this bout and new Intercontinental Champion, the British Bulldog.
I can't believe it. One of the greatest wrestling matches of all time has just taken place here at SummerSlam. The new Intercontinental Champion, the British Bulldog.
What made it more special was that it was a face versus face match, meaning both guys were fan favorites. However, Vince knew the crowd would be solidly behind Davey, and that would not split the audience. That it is where location matters. So it had seen that Bret was in a transition period, then seemingly out of nowhere, Bret would defeat Ric Flair at a house show in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan on October 12th, 1992. You thought I wouldn't get those locations correct.
And I blame Bret for this, but the older Jess realizes that this was Vince's call. You know, the steroid accusations were starting to get really tight. Hogan had left by this time. The Warrior was suspended right before Survivor Series in November. So right before the Warrior got suspended, like Vince realized, like, I got to get the title off either old guys and or steroid looking guys. So Flair was having an inner ear problem. He defeated Randy Savage for the world title in September to win it for the second time. And Vince was in a flux. Right? Yeah, Vince was like, dude, like Bret showed me in the business he knew how to do business by putting Davey Boy over, by understanding. It's like we all saw on the TV screen Davey Boy go over, but backstage, Bret really went over. He showed the office. He showed all the boys and girls in the back that, like, he is a leader.
So to be clear, he defeated Flair for the title in a house show, yeah?
Yes, in a house show. So, and I believe that it was because of his professionalism.
World Championship.
Yes, it was because of his professionalism in losing the IC title to Davey Boy in Wembley. I think, and main eventing it, like we were talking about earlier, Vince saw that, dude, Bret's fucking, he's a rock. Like, he doesn't get fucking nervous. He doesn't fucking do anything. Yeah. Bret goes out there and does his goddamn work. So, like I said, on the TV screen on SummerSlam, when Davey Boy won, we saw Davey Boy win. But behind the scenes, Bret really won because he won Vince over. He won a lot of people over back there, Patterson and all the other guys going like, you know what? Let's give him a chance. And then,
Did Chuck the referee, but he did not. Oh, he gave up. We've seen history made. Let's get the official word. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of this bout and new World Wrestling Federation champion, it's pandemonium here in Saskatoon.
And my big critique, dude, is like just have him beat Flair in a pay-per-view. But I guess Flair was getting older here. But he had an inner ear problem. I think Vince really didn't know what was going to happen with Flair, and so Vince was just like, you got to drop it to Bret.
It's a bit of panic mode.
Yeah. So I blamed this lackluster run on Bret when I was younger, and I was wrong. And I'm here to say I was wrong. And I'm here to say that the 45-year-old Jess fucking appreciates him. And I wish that he could have. They could have taken Flair off TV, kept the title on him, let Flair, get right with his inner ear problem. Bret could have beat him at Survivor Series 92 and or Royal Rumble 93. I've always believed that. I was like, why wouldn't you give him a pay-per-view where he could have beat Flair on a pay-per-view? But for some reason, one day, I just tuned into Saturday Morning Wrestling Superstars. By the way, this past weekend at a house show, Bret Hart beats Ric Flair for the world title. I'm like, the last big match that we just saw Bret in was him losing to Davey Boy. If you're watching the product, right? If you're just paying attention to the story they're telling us on screen. So out of nowhere, he wins the world title. I didn't buy it as a fan. And I loved Bret until that moment. And I was just like, I don't buy it. And then, like what you're going to read on, is he did the exact opposite of what Vince did with Hogan. Hogan would never fucking wrestle on dirty wrestling challenge
open challenge, man.
Hogan only fucking wrestled big names on pay-per-views. What they did with Bret was on Saturday Morning Wrestling and Wrestling Challenge, he was defending the world title against Virgil, Skinner, the Repo Man, Rick Martel, Papa Shango, and it was just like, this is what I felt as a fan, you're devaluing this title. Hulk Hogan only defended his title against Andre Bundy.
You know whose insecurities are being covered by that? VKM's, man.
Well, he was trying to change it, right? He knew, I have to get the title off these steroid guys. Excuse me. I have to get the title. What better thing to
Bret's
do?
my best bet, but I still don't.
He's
trust
a good
him
athlete.
entirely.
He's a good wrestler. Let's put it on.
But
and then,
I don't trust it, so I have to have him out there every week to cover. And
they came up with this whole. What did Vince call him? He was Bret is the fightingest champion in WWE history. Whatever fightingest means. Yeah, fightingest champion.
Did he actually say that?
No, he said that. Yeah, Bret Hart.
Wow.
So I, as a fan, am like, we're coming off the Hogan era. We're coming off the era where we had the Warrior, Hogan, Savage as our champions, and then we get Bret. Now behind the scenes, Bret wrestles circles around the Warrior. Don't get me wrong.
Hogan
even around Hogan,
Yeah.
and technically Savage, even though Savage was great.
Technically, almost everyone Savage in the locker room.
Yeah. But as the fan watching it, I was like, dude, what, you gave him and he wins a title the world title on a house show, and then he's defending against Virgil. I hope he can beat Virgil. You would think that the world champion could beat Virgil. I hope he can beat Papa Shango. You would think the world champion.
By the way, how does Virgil get a world title shot? What is happening?
I hope he can beat Rick Martel because you've let Rick Martel lose to everybody else. So I hope he can beat Rick Martel. You never saw Hogan
Rick Martel,
a
great AWA champion, but in WWF it's a different story.
Right, he was a tag champion.
I understand what you're saying completely.
So I got, but that was Vince wanted to go the opposite of Hogan. I don't want to save Bret. I want to overly put Bret on TV to really rub it in your face that he's my best wrestler. He's the world. So Vince at the time thought would get him over.
And he's not juicing.
Yeah, and he's not juicing. And so attendance was declining even before Bret won the title, by the way. Attendance was declining in house shows. And so it was unfortunately, Bret's first championship, because there was no build-up. There was no getting us used to Bret being on the world title level. It was
in the steroid trial era.
Yeah. Unfortunately, his first title run to me sucked as a fan. Time. Because it wasn't hyped. They didn't give us a pay-per-view win. They didn't give us anything like that. But
how
Bret,
much? Hey, Jess,
the performer Bret was stellar.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. How much time was put into legal strategy versus the actual product?
Oh my God! I would say 80% legal strategy, 20% product, right?
Bret, you got this, right? You got this. So
I'll go out there
that's what I'd say. So, at Survivor Series 1992, Bret would close out the year by defending his WWF Championship against the newly crowned Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels in a solid match. In December, it was announced that Bret would defend the WWF title against Razor Ramon at the January Royal Rumble. We all know that 1993 would be a very controversial and odd year for Bret Hart. But I have to tell you, when you really rack up this year,
You got to say career-wise, if you're looking at a resume, this was Bret's best fucking year. He starts off as he loses the Intercontinental title at house show, wins it back, and then he ends up as the World Heavyweight Champion by the end of the year in the span of less than a year.
If
like
you look
11
at
months,
it for hype, you're like, why was it done this way?
Right. But then later, the older Jess and Dave and Craig and all Cuz and all of us, we all learned, oh, dude, they were in a state of turmoil in the back. Like, they were just, Vince was fucking fighting for his life, with all these accusations. He had to get the title off somebody. I still think...
You remember Spider-Man?
Ric Flair ended up wrestling
trying to hold the subway back?
Yeah.
I feel like Bret Hart is doing this. He's like
Spider-Man?
I'm trying to hold it together. Yeah. And no one's helped.
And it's funny that the pay-per-view that you said that Bret ended the year on when he defended the title against Shawn, I think that's probably their best television match or pay-per-view match. I understand what the Iron Man match means to people, but I feel that their Survivor Series 92 match was their best match on television on pay-per-view. As a fan, I think this match is great.
Did you see that? Did you see that? Yes, no. The sharpshooter, can he do it? No, it's not. The shot stand. No, it's not. It's over. Don't give up. It's going to be over. Don't give up. He did it again. The Hitman Bret Hart, victorious. He still remains the WWF Champion.
I have never seen anything like this in my life.
But Ric Flair wrestled on that same card. You couldn't have had Flair drop the title to Bret at Survivor Series. That's my point. I don't know if maybe if Flair's inner ear problem scared Vince, and Vince was like, "What if he can never drop it? What if this is like a bad problem?"
What if Flair was going to him and said, "I have a serious issue."
Yeah, and I can't drop the title. Then he's like, "What do we do?" I guess you have a tournament at Survivor Series. There could have been anything they could have done. My point. But Vince was going through the air, maybe if I have it change at a house show, that's going to get people to go watch my house shows. Wow, if the world title will change at a house show, it could change hands anywhere. And I totally disagree with that. I've said that very loudly and proudly on past episodes. I think that's an awful fucking way to treat your titles because it devalues them. However, I understand no one had ever done that before. Well, the territories had done it, but Vince had never done that in his national promotion. I don't blame Vince for trying this, right? He had the best guy to do it, Bret. Fucking who better? But I wish that we just got a clean pay-per-view win. He beats Flair at Survivor Series 92 for the world title. It's a different run for Bret. It's different respect. It's different, the fans will accept him in a different way. The way they did it, it was just hard. We had no build-up. We saw him lose to Davey Boy in August, and then out of nowhere, this guy fucking wins the world title. We're like, how did this happen? And then he's defending it against Virgil, Rick Martel, the Repo Man, all these lower guys. And we're like, what are you doing? Why are we believing in this champion? I hope he can beat them. He better be able to. Hogan could. And I know that's so weird for me to say, but Hogan could. And it's just kind of... Bret had a thankless task of being the world champion after the Hogan, the Warrior, the Savage era. It was just not friendly for Bret at that time.
You know what we lose out of all this, and I know I'm jumping way ahead with the screw job and everything else. Bret understands the psychology of this business, and what if Bret was in the shadows over the last couple of decades, because they're like, "Hey, Bret, we fucked up. We want you to come on. We think you'd be great helping out people." I just wonder where the talent would be if Bret Hart had some kind of influence as a matchmaker, someone that strategized matches like Jamie Noble does, like other people do. And I think because of all this turmoil and all this stuff that he had no control over, by the way, the story trial, the screw job, bad timing. What if Bret was a real influence with, say, a Triple H and a Shawn Michaels right now? Which, because of all that turmoil and it happened, I don't know if they'd ever trust each other. But if things had changed a little bit, what could Bret have as an influence to talent today? Because he understood it. He understood the business. He understood you can do less to do more. Let's push this off because we're going to be in Wembley in 6 months, and this makes more sense, and then we'll finally give it to Shawn. Like, he, you know, you see those things. He understands those things as a wrestler, too. He's a former wrestler. He gets that. And I just feel he could be such a huge advocate to wrestling today, whether he was here, AEW, another place. And I think he's so withdrawn from it because of how it treated him. It'll never happen. And I think that is the biggest disappointment of wrestling right now, that he's not involved that way.
It's not even his fault.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
Not his fault. He was a victim of the circumstance and the era he was in.
Yeah.
He was so good.
Yeah, he was. In 92, I'm glad we covered it. Like I said, besides 97, I feel this is the most pivotal year in Bret's career, easily.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's the most uncovered and one of the most poignant. So,
and how many great matches? We started off with Rowdy Piper at WrestleMania 8, the British Bulldog at SummerSlam, testing out the ladder matches with Shawn Michaels, then ending the year against Shawn Michaels, beating Ric Flair, all these fucking big moments. Man.
92 is a big year.
Yeah.
Go back and check it out. For audio fans, give us a listen on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts, or watch our videos on YouTube at Our Wrestling Channel. On social media, can you give us a solid and follow us on Instagram or Twitter at O.W.P 2019? Wow. Or on Facebook at Our Wrestling
do what
Podcast.
you want. No, just watch the same bullshit you always do. It's fine.
That's all good. Hey.
Don't educate yourself.
For Justin Dave, this is the O.W.P signing off on a good episode. I like this one, man. This was fun.
That's good.
Hey, man. Have a good one.
Choice doesn't distort me, don't like you cowards. Do you WWF? This world is wrong to